In the Game of Thrones universe, Jon Snow's life is marked by constant dilemmas, torn between duty and personal desires. Yet what if one of the most pivotal moments in his life, his departure from the Wildlings, had never occurred? What if Jon Snow had decided to leave behind his vows and stay with the free folk, carving out a new destiny that would change the course of Westeros forever? Jon Snow's journey is defined by his outsider status, having been born a Stark but raised as a Snow, the bastard son of Eddard Stark. His life as a member of the Night's Watch had always felt like a duty that required sacrifice. But it was with the Wildlings, far from the rigid rules of the Watch, that Jon found a sense of freedom and acceptance he had never known. The Wildlings, including the fierce Tormund Giantsbane and the fiery Ygritte, treated him as one of their own, despite his noble birth. It was here, beyond the Wall, that Jon learned to fight not only for survival, but for a different kind of cause, one based on freedom, loyalty, and unity. When Jon Snow initially ventured into the lands of the Wildlings, his mission was one of infiltration. His loyalty was to the Night's Watch, and his task was to gather information about the Wildlings' movements. But as Jon spent more time with them, the lines between duty and personal loyalty began to blur. The harsh reality of life on the Wall and the oppressive hierarchy of the Night's Watch made Jon question his place. Unlike the structured and often brutal leadership of the Night's Watch, the Wildlings were bound together by a mutual need for survival. The more Jon witnessed their strength in unity, their disregard for the whims of Southern lords, and their willingness to fight for freedom, the more he realized that his sense of belonging had shifted. Jon's relationship with Ygritte, the fiery wildling woman who had first captured him, was also a crucial turning point. She showed him the world from the eyes of those who had been cast out of the Seven Kingdoms. And in her, Jon found something he had never known, true companionship and love. Ygritte wasn't just a lover to Jon, she was a partner who shared his values and taught him about the wildling way of life. For the first time, Jon felt truly accepted, not as a Stark or a Snow, but as Jon. But despite the warmth and companionship he found among the free folk, Jon's internal conflict remained. He was born a Stark, and the call of duty, the sense of loyalty to his family and his brothers at the Wall, was never far from his mind. But in this alternate timeline, Jon decides to forego his return to the Wall. Instead, he chooses to stay with the Wildlings, aligning himself with their struggle for freedom from the tyranny of the Southern kings and lords. With Jon Snow now a part of their community, his leadership qualities began to shine through. He had fought alongside the Wildlings, helped them survive the oncoming dangers of the North, and he was trusted as one of their own. But leadership among the free folk was different from leadership in the Night's Watch. Jon's decisions would not be based on duty or honor alone. They would be driven by the needs of the Wildlings, a people who were free but constantly fighting to survive. Under Jon's guidance, the Wildlings began to solidify their position. He began to organize them, not just as a motley group of rebels, but as a unified force. His sense of honor, ingrained from his days at Winterfell, would have influenced his leadership. But Jon was also a pragmatic leader. He understood that the Wildlings, with their way of life, were at a constant disadvantage when it came to resources, technology, and manpower. To survive, they needed to be united, stronger than ever before. Jon's tactical mind and growing sense of purpose led him to consider the long-term future of the Wildlings. It was not just about surviving, but about thriving. His first goal would be to secure the Wildlings' position in the North. The Wall had been their greatest barrier, and with the right strategy, Jon could help them push southward and claim more territory for their people. This would mean taking on the mighty forces of the South, particularly the Kingdom of the North. But Jon was no stranger to impossible odds. He had already proven that with his leadership at the Battle of the Bastards, where he took on a foe much stronger than himself. His decision to stay among the Wildlings also brought a shift in how Jon was viewed in Westeros. The South had always viewed the free folk with disdain, treating them as little, more than savages. But now, with Jon Snow among them, the Wildlings had a leader who could challenge the southern kingdoms. Jon's Stark blood, coupled with his loyalty to the free folk, positioned him as a symbol of defiance, a figure who could rally not just the Wildlings, but other northern houses to his cause. If Jon Snow had remained with the Wildlings, the alliances he could have formed with northern families, particularly those loyal to his true Stark lineage, would have changed the political landscape of Westeros. Jon's leadership would likely have influenced the Wildlings to form more structured alliances with the North. The North, a kingdom that had long been divided from the rest of Westeros, was ripe for unity. Jon could have used his connection to House Stark to bring the North together, joining forces with other houses that had long suffered under the rule of the Southern kings. A united North under Jon Snow could have been a powerful force in its own right, one that could have matched the might of the Lannisters and the Baratheons. But even with Jon's growing power and influence, the challenges of leadership were immense. The Wildlings, though united under Jon, still faced the threat of the White Walkers, an ancient enemy that threatened to destroy them all. Jon's decision to stay with the Wildlings meant that he would have to face this enemy head-on. The North was no longer just a place to survive. It was a battleground. Jon would be forced to make difficult decisions that would test his leadership, his loyalty, and his very soul. In this alternate timeline, Jon Snow's life with the Wildlings would not be one of peace. It would be a constant struggle for survival, for unity, and for freedom. But it would also be a life where Jon found his true purpose. He was no longer a man caught between two worlds. He had chosen a world where he could lead, where he could fight for what he believed in, and where his actions could change the course of history. Jon Snow's decision to remain with the Wildlings brought him into direct conflict with the Southern Lords, who had long viewed the free folk as little more than outlaws, unworthy of their land or power. Yet, Jon's leadership skills, his military prowess, and his connection to House Stark positioned him as more than just a wildling. He became a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for those who wanted to break free from the oppressive rule of the Southern kings. But Jon Snow's rise was not without its challenges. Though he had gained the trust of the free folk, his presence among them was still controversial. Many of the Wildlings, especially those who had been wary of the leadership of the Night's Watch, viewed Jon's decision to stay as a betrayal of his past. They questioned his loyalty to their cause, wondering if he had been sent to infiltrate them by the Night's Watch or by some other power in the South. Yet Jon proved his loyalty time and time again, both through his actions and his commitment to their cause. Jon's leadership was instrumental in uniting the free folk and transforming them from a scattered group of survivors into a formidable force capable of taking on the southern kingdoms. Under Jon's guidance, the Wildlings began to organize themselves into a structured society. They built alliances with the northern houses, forging a bond with the likes of House Stark, House Mormont, and other northern families who shared their disdain for the Lannisters and the Baratheons. These alliances gave Jon access to resources, men, and knowledge that would prove essential in the coming battles. But Jon Snow's leadership wasn't limited to just uniting the Wildlings with the North. He knew that to truly secure the free folks' future, he needed to challenge the southern lords who had long seen them as nothing more than pests. In this alternate timeline, Jon Snow took it upon himself to rally the North, and even parts of the South, to his cause. His unique position as a Stark by blood and a Wildling by choice gave him a platform to bring together diverse groups who had previously been divided by centuries of political rivalry. One of Jon's first major moves was to lead a campaign to secure the North from further southern invasion. With the threat of the White Walkers looming, Jon knew that the North would need to stand united if they were to survive the coming storm. His leadership would not only involve preparing for the invasion of the undead, but also taking strategic control of key northern territories. Jon's reputation, combined with his military expertise, made him a respected figure across the North. Soon, he had enough support to begin waging an aggressive campaign against the southern invaders. But not everyone in the North was on Jon's side. Some of the northern houses, particularly those who were loyal to the Starks, viewed Jon's alliance with the Wildlings with suspicion. House Bolton, House Karstark, and other houses that had historically held power in the North would not easily accept a man who had once been an outsider and who now held power over them. These tensions set the stage for a civil war within the North, as Jon Snow's leadership was challenged by those who sought to keep the old ways of ruling intact. As Jon navigated these turbulent waters, his relationship with his true Stark heritage came to the forefront. Jon had always known he was more than just a bastard. He was a Stark at heart. Yet the political implications of his Stark bloodline, particularly his potential claim to Winterfell, were never far from the surface. His decision to remain with the Wildlings made him a figure of both admiration and suspicion. The question arose: could Jon Snow truly become the leader of the North without fully embracing his Stark identity, or would his role as a Wildling leader forever tie him to the people who were seen as outcasts by the southern aristocracy? Meanwhile, in the South, the power struggle between the Lannisters and the Tyrells continued to escalate. With the fall of Joffrey and the instability created by his death, Tywin Lannister's grip on the throne was weakening. The Lannisters, though still a powerful family, were now divided and at odds with each other. Tyrion, who had once been a key player in his family's affairs, was no longer trusted by his father, and Cersei's power was in constant flux. The resulting instability allowed Jon Snow to expand his influence into the southern parts of Westeros. Jon's actions didn't go unnoticed in King's Landing. The Lannisters viewed him as a growing threat to their control, especially as he began to gain support from the northern houses. The Lannisters' response was swift and ruthless, but Jon was no stranger to power struggles. He had witnessed firsthand the cunning of the southern lords and the brutality they were capable of. In this alternate timeline, Jon Snow began to play the political wars game in ways he had never anticipated, using his position as a Wildling leader to turn the tides in his favor. By uniting the North and the Free Folk, Jon Snow became a formidable force, one that no longer needed the approval of the Southern kings. His identity as a Stark, his alliance with the Wildlings, and his growing influence over the North positioned him as a potential rival to the throne. But Jon's goal was not to take the throne for himself. He saw the crown as a symbol of the South's oppressive rule, and he was determined to build a new world where the North, the Wildlings, and even the oppressed people of the South could live freely. As the threat of the White Walkers drew closer, Jon Snow's leadership was put to the ultimate test. He had united the North, secured the loyalty of the Free Folk, and established alliances with key houses in Westeros. But could he hold it all together when the true battle began? The battle for survival against the army of the dead? In this new timeline, Jon Snow became not just a king or a leader, but a symbol of resistance against the tyranny of the Southern lords. His journey had been one of growth, self-discovery, and sacrifice. But in the end, it was Jon's ability to unite the disparate peoples of Westeros that would determine whether they would live or die. What if Jon Snow had never left the Wildlings? In this alternate timeline, Jon stays with the Free Folk and leads them to a new future. How would his decision impact the Seven Kingdoms? From uniting the North to challenging the Lannisters, Jon Snow's journey takes an unexpected turn. Watch now to discover how Jon's leadership would change Westeros forever.